He's got it. We're going to start in Genesis 42 this evening, so if you have a Bible, go there. And we're going to finish Genesis tonight. Before we start preaching this story to you and winding up how this goes, I want to remind you that Saturday morning, the Halltown Baptist Church, just down the road here, will be having a big, I'm not sure what they call it, but a big event. There'll be people there giving haircuts, they'll be giving out food, there'll be just a real community-wide event. So if you are aware of that and know anything about it, Saturday morning down in Halltown, you need to be there. Dorothy is continuing to improve, and we want to keep praying for her and bless her as she recovers. It'll be good to have her back. Let's see, I think that's all I need to tell you. We've been talking about character as we end up Genesis, and tonight the story will show us that if we live with strong moral character, things really will work out. That will get us through all kinds of jams, ups and downs. And so tonight we're just encouraging you to listen to this story. Really not a sermon tonight, just a story. And as I tell it, when I was in seminary, our preaching professors would tell us that when you tell a story, you really don't need to preach, because the story will carry the message that people need to hear. So tonight I'm going to tell a story and let it preach to you, let it speak to you. I will not be reading text this evening, but I'm going to be interpreting text. I'm going to run it through the Scotty funnel, all right, and then it'll come out to you tonight. So Joseph's brothers were sent to Egypt to search for grain because it had gotten really bad up in Palestine. It had been dry for a long time. People were hungry. Crops were failing. I know what I was going to tell you. I've been so depressed lately. I miss griping about drought. You know, all day I've been wanting to complain about the drought, and it's rained every day. Anyway, they've been complaining up there for a long time. So Jacob said to his sons, "Boys, go down to Egypt, see if you can get some grain." Except young Benjamin. Now, young Ben was born much later. Now, Benjamin, now you remember the story whenever Jacob started getting his wives. Remember, he had one wife he wanted to marry, but he woke up the next morning with the other one. Remember that story? Well, the one he wanted to marry had one son, and that was the one that's down in Egypt. Now, this boy born late in life, his name is Benjamin, and Joseph has never seen his young brother Benjamin, and so this is where that comes. So Benjamin was the kind of a favorite son, born late in life in that large family, born to the favorite wife in that large family. So there was a lot of heartache and hardship there in Canaan because of the famine. So everybody was going down to Egypt. Not just the children of Israel, but a lot of other people were going to Egypt for help. Now, whenever they arrived in Egypt, everybody had to go to Joseph's house to buy grain. Because if you remember, Joseph was in charge of everything in Egypt. He was the exchequer. He was the right-hand man of Egypt. He was the whatever. Everything had to flow through him. So when you went to Egypt to buy grain, you had to go to Joseph's office to get started. So when these boys, who were Joseph's brothers, when they arrived in Egypt, starving, hungry, I'm sure ragged and bedraggled, and they went to Joseph's office, and Joseph recognized them immediately. He knew who they were, but they didn't know who he was. Because there he was with a shaved head. And you know how the Egyptians, if you've seen studies, there's pictures of the Ramses era Egyptians. They were a totally different style. They were shaved, everything was shaved, and they had a real strong eyeliner, and they were made up. So he looked so different than he did when he was a shepherd. So there they show up, and here's this Egyptian-looking guy, and so they go in to see him, and they didn't recognize him, but he knew who they was. So he pretended not to know them. He said, he just acted like he didn't know who they were, and treated them kind of gruffly, and not so rudely, but gruffly. And just, just treat them kind of mean. And so he began to question them. He said, all right, where are you guys from? And tell me about your family setting. Now, Joseph was speaking to them in Egyptian. And he had an interpreter that was interpreting to them in Hebrew. You with me? Joseph knew how to speak Hebrew, but he was speaking Egyptian. And so he spoke to them through an interpreter. And so he questioned them about where you guys from and where you live and what's it like there. And so during the questioning, Joseph, I bet you remembered his childhood dreams. Do you remember what Joseph's childhood dreams were? He dreamed that one day his brothers and his father would come to him and bow down before him. But it got him in a lot of trouble. You know, when you got a brother like Lonnie in your family that expects all that respect, and well, you know what that's like. And so here he was. He told them all how wonderful he was going to be one day, and now it's happened exactly like he dreamed it. It's happened. Now Joseph accused them of being spies. Now he was just wanting to mess with them. You with me? He just wanted to it was kind of a ruse he was pulling on them. And so they began to defend their honor by assuring him that they were honest men. Oh no, we're not spies. We've not come down here to steal. We're honest men. While we're all sons of one father, one man. We're all sons of one big family. And as they began to make their excuses and try to defend themselves, they talked about this and said that they had a younger brother back in Canaan. A younger brother. Well, Joseph didn't know about a younger brother. So that piqued his interest, and so he began to question him about that younger brother. So he continued the ruse by rejecting their excuses for being in Egypt. He said, "No, you're not down there. You're spies. You're coming to see what you can steal or how you can take advantage of us." And he said, "Now here's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to prove yourself. If you're really who you say you are, you're going to have to go back to Canaan, get your youngest brother, and bring him down here." Well, you know what's going on. He wanted to see that young brother. So he put this all on and so that they'd bring him down. Now, he would keep the whole bunch in prison. He's going to put them all in jail. He said, "All your bunch of spies, I'm just going to put you in jail, and I'm going to send one of you back to get Benjamin." So he put everybody in jail for 3 days. For 3 days. They didn't know Joseph could understand their language, so he overheard them speaking to each other. So they thought they were speaking a private language. He didn't know, so they were talking to each other. And they said, "Well, surely we're being punished for the way we treated that brother. You remember that brother we sold?" He said, "Well, surely this is surely God punishing for that." And Reuben said, "I told you so." Reuben said, "I told you." So when they began to talk among themselves, Joseph turned his back on them to hide his tears. He had to kind of compose himself, because, folks, this is high emotion. Imagine the emotions that are here today. So Simeon was kept as a prisoner. He didn't keep them all in prison, but he kept Simeon and sent all the rest of them back with enough food to save the family back in Canaan. Plus, they brought silver to pay for their food, and so they paid it for it. And so then they loaded their donkeys with grain sacks. But what Joseph said was, "Fellas, when nobody's looking, put the silver that they paid for it back in their sacks." Are you with me now? Okay. So he was just messing with them. One day, he was still trying to get, I don't know, he wasn't trying to get revenge, I don't think, but he was messing with him. He had something he was working out. Now, the first night on the trail, when they were heading home, they put up a spike camp that night, and one of them opened his sack. He was going to feed his donkey some grain, and he found that silver in the top of the sack. And boy, they were shocked, confused, afraid. What has happened here? And they talked about them among themselves. What's God doing? Is this another way God's just trying to punish us? What's going on here? So they kept going. They went on back to Canaan. So when they got home, they told old man Jacob about the trip. And the man in charge, they said, "That man down there, he spoke harshly to us. Yeah, he treated us rough. He accused us of spying. And now we told him we're honest men. And we're all sons of one man back in Canaan. And we've even got a younger brother back there. Now this man in Egypt," now they're talking about their brother Joseph. But this man in Egypt said he's going to test us, so he kept Simeon as a hostage and made us promise to bring Benjamin back with us if we ever wanted to trade in Egypt again. That's what we got to do. The old man, Jacob, he kind of got upset. He said, why did you tell him you had a younger brother? What's wrong with you guys? Well, it just kind of slipped out. Over excuses, making excuses. He just said, there's no way I'm sending Benjamin back. It ain't going to happen. You're just going to have to work out some else. But I'm not sending. Well, one son's already dead, Joseph. And Simeon is held a hostage. And if I send that younger boy back, I'm going to lose a whole bunch. I'll lose my family. Everything's against me, the old man said. So Reuben, one of the brothers, he offered his sons as a hostage to Jacob. He said, okay, Dad, my sons, I'm going to go back down and get them, but I'm going to give you my sons. And if I don't do what I said, you can have them. Do whatever with them you want, but they're going to be yours. But he wasn't going to send Benjamin. Now Genesis 43, the second trip. They're going back now. The famine gets worse. They don't go back for a while, though. They stay, I don't know how long, but they stay for some time. And but the famine just deepened, and they were getting hungry, and people were starving. And Judah reminded Jacob that Benjamin has to go, or they can't trade in Egypt. It's not going to work. So Jacob, or Israel, asked them why they told him Benjamin. Why did you tell him? He said, well, that headman down there in Egypt, he was tricky. He's tricky. So Judah said, okay, send Benjamin, and I'll guarantee you safety. And he said, besides, if we'd have gone already, we'd have been back twice. That's what it said right there. He said, okay, take things to trade, balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take all that with you and trade for trade. And take silver, and take back the silver that they sent with you. Take that back too, and even more. So that's what they did. He said maybe it was a mistake. So they left. Now when they stood before Joseph the second time with Benjamin there with them, Joseph ordered a meal prepared in his house. Now remember, this is the head honcho in Egypt. So he ordered his servants and whatever, the whole country was his. He said, prepare a meal at my house for these travelers, for these traders or whatever. Now these boys, the Jewish boys, they were scared. Why is he wanting us to come to his house? He's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. That's what's going to happen. He's going to get us out there where nobody's looking. And he's going to kill us because he thinks we're spies. And he thinks we stole silver. So they got to Joseph's house and they began to make apologies and excuses. It explained about the silver. They said, we have no idea how that silver got in our grain. And they promised, they said, now we've brought all that back and we even brought more back to trade you. So we don't want you to be upset with us. So Joseph said, it's all right. It's not. He said, it's all right. God must have given you that silver. Because I have the silver you gave me. He lied to him. But he told him, he had the silver they gave him. He said, God must have given you that silver. Well, then they brought Simeon out, and he was glad to see the family again. And the family's glad to see him, that he'd survived. And so then they had this feast there at Joseph's house. Man, what a great relief. They talked and laughed, and they talked about Jacob, the old man of Israel, and talked about home. Now Joseph saw Benjamin, and when he saw him there with all the brothers, he had to leave the room. He was just broken up with emotions. He started crying, and so he left the room to get himself composed. Benjamin was his full brother. See, that was the only full brother Joseph had. All the others had the same father, but they had different mothers. But little Benjamin was the full brother, and he'd never seen him, and so he was so glad to see him. So when he got control of his emotions, he returned and shared the meal with his brothers. The brothers, they all ate together. The Egyptians, they all ate together. And then Joseph, he ate by himself. All right, this is how the meal set up. The Hebrews, the Egyptians, and then Joseph. You remember how Jewish people won't eat with non-kosher people? Well, the Egyptians are the same way. They wouldn't eat with the Jewish people because of their religion. And so here, another thing Joseph did to mess with them, he set the Jewish boys in birth order. Put them all out in birth order. I'm sure they had little nameplates, you know. But he set them all out in birth order. And they sit there thinking, how does he know the order in which we were born? Well, they were shocked that they knew that. So when Benjamin was served, they served Benjamin from Joseph's table, and they gave him 5 times as much food as anybody else got. So he poured it on a little Benjamin. Now Joseph plans a scheme. Joseph's trying to figure out a way to get his father down there. He wants to see the old Israel, Jacob. He wants to see the old man. So he's working out a plan. How can I get him? So he's thinking, here's what I'm going to do. So this is how it unfolds. So before the brothers leave for home, Joseph has their grain loaded on their donkeys again, and more silver. Are you with me? More silver in each of the sacks. So the money they brought to pay, he put that back in their sacks, sent them home. Except for young Benjamin. Now what he did to young Benjamin was, see, the head man in Egypt had a very special silver cup that he drank out of. And I mean, it was probably worth $1 million. I mean, it was it was an artifact of beauty and prestige. It had, the head man in Egypt's name on it, and he put his special cup in Benjamin's sack. Okay. Now, so when they head for the home and they stop on the trail a few hours out, he sent riders, Joseph sent riders after them to catch him, because he wanted to catch him this time with the silver in their sack. So they're on the trail, and he sent the riders out, and they said, no, we've not stolen a thing. Well, we wouldn't possibly do that. So they began to dump the sacks out. There was the silver, and the silver, and the silver, and Joseph's cup. Well, they were caught. Now, the boys were scared to death, and when they brought back to Joseph, he scolded them, treated them harshly, and they did all they could to ask for mercy and try to explain themselves. Joseph kept Benjamin. He said, I'm going to keep Benjamin. I'm going to keep him here. He's going to be a slave, because you guys have treated me wrong. I'm going to keep that young boy here. And so the Jewish boys, they began to look at each other and said, if we go home without Benjamin, old man Jacob, he's going to die. He won't live through it. He'll die. Because he loves that young boy, and he's lost another son already. And man, if we go home without Benjamin, they said, it'll just be horrible. We just can't go back without him. Genesis 45. When the Hebrews were sick with dread, they pleaded their case, and it had failed. Jacob, he revealed who he was. The big reveal. I mean, these boys were sick to death. They knew their young brother was going to be held hostage. And so finally, Joseph gives up, and he says, boys, I'm Joseph. In Hebrew. He spoke to them in Hebrew. He said, I'm Joseph. I'm the boy that you sold to those slaves, those Ishmaelite traders. I am him. I'm your brother. Can you imagine how they felt? Here, the #1 man in Egypt. He had the power to kill him in a second. And they'd mistreated him, and now they were caught red-handed. So, the old Joseph, he sent everybody out of the room, all the Egyptians, and they all began to cry and weep. It says they cried so loud that the Egyptians all around heard about it. There was so much crying and weeping that news of this even got to the Pharaoh. Even Pharaoh heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer because they were terrified at his presence. They were shocked into silence. Then Joseph began to reveal his heart. He said, fellas, don't worry anymore about what you did to me. He said, God used it to send me ahead to save the family from starvation. I want to read it to you because, folks, this is absolutely precious. It says, God sent me ahead of you to preserve you for a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, Lord of his entire household, and ruler of Egypt. Folks, listen to me. This is powerful theology. you need to take and fold it into your life. Sometimes people do things to you for bad, but it may not be. But God's plan is something good. You may mean it for bad, but God can mean it for good. So just hold on to that. So Joseph said, boys, go home, get Dad, and bring him here. Do it quick, don't waste time. Go home and get him. Now the famine, he said, this famine we're in has 5 more years to go before it's over. So move to Egypt, bring everybody down. I'll settle you in the land of Goshen. You ever heard anybody say land of Goshen? The land of Goshen. Well, that's the place where they put all the Jews that came down from all of Jacob's family. And they put them in the land of Goshen. The reason they put them there is because Egyptians despised shepherds. I don't know why. They just thought shepherds were low-class people. So they want to separate all the shepherds, so they put them up in the land of Goshen. Let me tell you where the land of Goshen is. It's up in the delta of the Nile. Are you with me? You know what delta land is like? It's topsoil, about 25, 30 feet deep. It'll grow anything. It's the best possible. It'll grow anything. It's the best land you could possibly ever get. And so he settled his brothers in the land of Goshen, in the Nile Delta, up there as it spreads out. So go home and get your dad and bring him down. We'll put your livestock, bring everything. Bring your sheep, camels, goats, whatever. Bring them all down with you. I'm going to read verse 14. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him, weeping. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. I tell you, this touches my heart because I have a big family. I have lots of brothers. And I can imagine if one of them had been gone that long or we get to see each other, it would have been tremendous. So Pharaoh was pleased with Joseph's decision, and he said, okay, Joseph, I'll help you out. I'll confirm it. I'll ratify everything you've done. And so he said, I'm going to send my best moving carts with you. So the best moving carts in Egypt take off for Canaan, for Palestine. So here we have this great entourage of Egyptians with these huge, nice carts and horses. They're all heading for home to bring the family back. So they get home. They start telling Jacob, the old man, the story about Joseph. Now Joseph didn't believe them at first. Jacob didn't believe him at first. He said, "No, this can't be that boy. Remember, he was killed." And they said, "No, he wasn't killed. Dad, we've got to tell you, we sold him. We blew it. We sold him. But he made it good, Dad. He got down to Egypt and he worked his way up, and now he's the #1 man in all of Egypt." So finally they agreed. They finally got over everything, and the moving vans that said condensed him. So Jacob decided, okay, I'm going to go down to Egypt and see my boy. I'm going to go down and see my boy. So that way they all went. Chapter 46, the move back to Egypt. So God spoke to Jacob at Beersheba that night. Now they were heading back, and they stopped at this famous place called Beersheba. And if you've been with me through Genesis, there's a lot of neat stuff happened here at this place. Abraham and a lot of them have been through here. So that night at Beersheba, in a night vision, God came to the old man, Jacob, Israel, and he said to him, it's okay. It's okay to go back down to Egypt. I'll move the whole family down there, God said, and I'll take care of you there, and I'll bring you back. Sit you with me? He said, go ahead and go. I'll move you down there. And God said, you'll stay there for a while, and then I'll bring you back to the promised land. He told him that. Now, when they got there, they counted them. There were 70 family members, 70 of them, who arrived in the land of Goshen. 70 family members, counting Joseph's 2 sons who were born in Egypt. Well, Joseph married while he was there, and he had 2 sons. So when he added it all up, there were 70 of them that moved back to Egypt. Now, there's going to be about 1 million of them come back later, but 70 of them moved into Egypt. Chapter 47. After they arrived and settled in, Joseph took 5 of his brothers to go meet Pharaoh. And after the interview with Pharaoh, even Pharaoh's herds were handed over to the Hebrews for safekeeping. In other words, they so impressed Pharaoh that Pharaoh gave the Jewish people all of his animals that he owned, and they took care of them. Oh my goodness. You all haven't been listening very fast. We're not going to get this done. Okay, let me summarize it. Joseph had done such a good job of preparing the nation for the famine that he began to charge other countries money for the food, and he even charged the Egyptian people, farmers, to eat. And what happened by the time the famine was over, Pharaoh owned everything in Egypt. Every house, every cow, every horse, every donkey. Pharaoh owned every business and every piece of land in Egypt by the time the famine was over, because Joseph had made him extremely rich. You can see how much he thinks of Joseph. Then Joseph instituted a tax on all the Egyptian people, was 1/5 of their annual income. 1/5. That'd be nice to move down to that low tax rate.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to try to wind this up real quick. The old man said, boys, in chapter 47, verse 31, swear to me, he said. Then Joseph swore to him, and Israel worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. The old man wanted to go home. He said, when I die, I'll die down here. He said, I know that. When I die, I want you to take my bones, take me back to the promised land when you go, because God's promised to take us back. Well, then he died. Before he died, he blessed them all. It was a precious time of sharing everything. Everybody was happy. In chapter 49, Jacob called for his servants. He said, gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. And then for the rest of that chapter, he began to outline a prophetic insight, a vision for each of the boys, what they would do, what they would be, what their families would become. Real interesting reading if you want to take time to read chapter 49. In chapter 50, Joseph died. They embalmed him. They mummified him. He became a mummy. They're in Egypt. And they embalmed him. And normally they embalmed for 40 days. They embalmed the old man Jacob for 70 days. In other words, they did more than normal, as much as they would for a Pharaoh. So Joseph asked for a furlough to go home, and they all went home and went back with him. What an entourage. The Egyptians sent their heads of every state, all the dignitaries, everybody. There was a huge entourage, made the trip all the way back to the promised land to bury the old man, and they went home. It was an amazing thing. And then Joseph came back and continued to be number one in Egypt. Joseph lived to be 110 years old. He saw his great-great-great-grandchildren born, Ephraim and grandson Manasseh. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land of promise. He has promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Here's what you need to know. That's the end of Genesis. God keeps his promises. Never fails. God keeps his word. God works out all things. He works all things together for good to those that love the Lord. We'll see it here. God even takes things done for evil and turns them into good. Somebody's done something bad to you. God can turn it into good. Evil deeds that we've done here haunt us all of our lives. Those boys never did get over selling their brother to slavery. It haunted them all their lives. But listen now, God's grace covers all our sin. God's grace covers it. Lives lived with character prosper and can bless many, many other people. So folks, live with high moral standards and trust God to work out all things for good in your life. And that's tonight's story. Let's pray together.